Over on our website at sportstalkatl.com, I have begun my free agent wish list by position of need. Already up is the edge rushers and the quarterbacks. So if you want to go check those out. For this segment, we are going to talk about the quarterbacks. And in my mind, there's really only three options. Yes, we could talk about guys like, Taylor Heineke's not, but we could talk about backup options, Ryan Tannehill, stuff like that. I didn't even include them because this is about who's going to be the starting quarterback potentially in Atlanta. There's only three options: Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield, or Kirk Cousins. Two of them have been linked throughout the offseason to the Falcons, and Mayfield and Cousins. And I imagine if those two guys re-sign, Russell Wilson will start getting linked to Atlanta. How would you rank these three guys in terms of being under center in 2024 for the Atlanta Falcons?
I don't think it's even a question of who the third one is, and it's Russell Wilson. And I think the debates begin for 1 and 2. And it all depends on your preference. I don't think there's a wrong answer, whether you have it Kirk Cousins, then Baker Mayfield, or vice versa. Me personally, we're going to differ here a little bit. Makes for good content. It's Kirk Cousins. Unless you anticipate the Achilles being a real issue and Baker Mayfield's 2023 campaign isn't a flash in the pan. Up until this point, it's by far and away Baker's best season. If you think he's that ascending talent, he's obviously the choice. For my money, I do think, Kirk Cousins isn't Lamar Jackson. Like, the Achilles thing is a thing, but also I'm not too worried about it. He's obviously a healthy guy. He's not Big Ben where he's, in the offseason drinking beers and stuff. Kirk Cousins cares about his craft. Kirk Cousins is closer to Tom Brady than Ben Roethlisberger is what I'm mentioning. He's obviously not Tom Brady. Father Time wins always, but I still think, I'm not too worried about the Achilles. It is worth worrying about. I am not. And it's very easy to me to steal Kirk Cousins away from Minnesota. If you're Atlanta, if you want him bad enough, you give him that fully guaranteed deal. It's that simple.
I think what's interesting about both these top two guys that we're talking about, Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins, is it's been reported by everybody that neither is going to give their team a hometown discount. Yep. So whoever wants
that works in Atlanta's favor.
Yeah, whoever wants him is going to have to obviously, because he's not on not on one of those teams. So whoever wants those guys, Kirk Cousins, he's received 2 fully guaranteed deals. That's what he's going to be looking for. Absolutely. And I imagine if the Falcons are willing to go 3 years, they'll be able to get him no matter what, even if they go like $35 million instead of $40 million. If they give him 3 fully guaranteed at $35 million, I think that probably takes him out of the Vikings consideration. Now, do you want to do that to a 36-year-old quarterback coming off one of the most significant injuries you could possibly get? That's why I have him ranked number 2. But in terms of resume and who they've been throughout their entire careers and who they were before Kirk Cousins' injury, he's obviously the best option. I just kind of like Baker Mayfield. One, it's a personal preference. I like the Bake Show. I like his swagger. I like his competitive energy. I think he showed a real sense of maturity that maybe he didn't have in Cleveland and Tampa Bay. The guys raved about him right when he came into the locker room. Obviously, he leads them to an NFC South title. Obviously, he leads them to a blowout playoff win over last year's team that was in the Super Bowl and really almost had him in the NFC Championship where anything could have happened. I mean, look at the Lions. They almost won. So they were right there competing for a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield. He's also 29 years old. Yeah. I think he could be an ascending talent. So I think a lot of it comes down to personal preference. But the fully guaranteed contract for Kirk Cousins, the fact that he's 36 years old and the Achilles injuries, listen, a lot of these guys fall off a cliff, and you don't want to be hanging on guaranteeing someone $40+ million and him fall off a cliff. That's how you set your franchise back 4 or 5 years.
I was talking about it in the prior segment. If you missed it, go check it out on the YouTube Sports Talk ATL. That, the Falcons sit with a very healthy salary cap, and the quickest way to kind of send it down the crapper, so to speak, is to give a guy who's coming off a serious injury a fully guaranteed deal. Now, I just think with modern medicine, an Achilles tear for a non-mobile quarterback, Kirk Cousins wasn't mobile before the injury. He's not going to be expected to be mobile after. He's a pocket passer. I think he can do plenty of damage from the pocket. I think he's obviously, a very serious competitor. He wants to be back where he was physically. Obviously, there is worry about, because these guys will just fall off the face of a cliff. Like, it happened to Matt Ryan. Like, Matt Ryan was 1 year, he was still Dyson.
I think he was a good example. I think he's like
the perfect example.
I almost think he's like, that's almost too nice. Like, I think Matt Ryan didn't fall off as much as we've seen other quarterbacks fall off. I mean, go look at Peyton Manning at the end of his career.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Big Ben is a perfect example as well. But again, Matt Ryan took care of his body a lot better than somebody like Big Ben did. So I think Kirk Cousins, and he's not this big guy, so I see maybe some of the concern there, but I'm just going with the assumption the Achilles is not going to be a problem, which is obviously a huge hurdle, just assuming that. But I think more so even that, like, Baker did very well this past season, but are we sure it wasn't like Dave Canales? I know we are all very high on Zach Robinson, but like,
well, Dave Canales and those weapons. I mean, the weapons in Tampa Bay are very comparable to what he's probably going to have. But then you got a guy like Zach Robinson. Obviously, I like the fact that Baker's 29 years old. I mean, he's not even 30 years old yet. So if he does turn out to be a guy, if he is an ascending talent, then you're looking at something that could be a long-term answer, which really, when you're looking at free agency, none of these guys, except for potentially Baker Mayfield. But let's talk a little bit about Russell Wilson. And we've talked about why he's intriguing, and it's the contract.
It's one reason.
He could be taking a veteran minimum contract.
It's the only reason.
He's still an NFL quality quarterback. Now, we heard him say he still wants to win 2 Super Bowls. Now, I think focus on getting back to the playoffs and maybe winning a playoff game before we're talking about Super Bowls. But obviously, he still thinks he's got a lot of time left in this league, and he's willing to take, potentially a veteran minimum contract. That's attractive, especially if Kirk goes back to Minnesota and Baker stays in Tampa.
Like I said to begin this, he's squarely the third option out of these 3. And if very possible, Cousins returns to Minnesota, Baker returns to Tampa, he's quickly number 1 on that list. And as you said, it is the only reason I'm intrigued by Russell Wilson is the price tag, because first and foremost, the sanctity of a locker room and the vibes in Flowery Branch are very important. Raheem Morris feels like he's that kind of coach to prioritize that. Russell Wilson is a cheese ball. He doesn't feel like he connects. He's like more politician than football player at this point in his career. That's my biggest concern with him is how are you going to vibe and mesh with everybody in the locker room? So I think that's an important thing to consider. Obviously, I think his play was overblown. He's not as bad as people were making him out to be. He was solid. And for a $2 million price tag, he's more than solid.
Yeah, I mean, he's the third option in this conversation. Squarely. No doubt, because of the potential upside you could get with Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield. But in the same time, he probably has the highest floor in terms of if it doesn't work out, it's like you just cut ties and it's only a 1-year thing. If Baker Mayfield or Kirk Cousins doesn't work out, you're locked in for 3-4 years at $30+ million, and you could have screwed your franchise for the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, that's the kind of mistake that you can't just recover from unless Brock Purdy lands to you at Mr. Irrelevant. So it's interesting because, yes, he is easily the third option, but he's also kind of low-key the safest option for the Falcons because of the contract he's going to potentially require. That wraps up our show for this evening. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll be back with a ton more Falcons free agent talk tomorrow.